think about our country. So if you look at our country, like, okay, well, what if that's what families were up to? What if a family had a mother and a father that was using their passion to fulfill their purposes, and then they were able to articulate all of the language and all of the frameworks that they use to do it to their children so that they can raise their children? So you know what I'm talking about? Like, that is a very powerful country. That supersedes warfare and everything like that as far as I'm concerned, because that is the core of human existence, and that's what makes this country strong.
It feels like that is what has made the country strong. And it feels like maybe that's a skill that is slipping through our fingers now, and we need to get it back. Welcome back to the Raising Men podcast. Today's episode is a special one for me, not just because of our guest, but because his work is part of the very foundation of this show. Eric Davis is a decorated U.S. Navy SEAL, a master sniper instructor, and the best-selling author of Raising Men: Lessons Navy SEALs Learned from Their Training and Taught to Their Sons. Long before this podcast existed, his book helped shape many of the principles we talk about on this show: resilience, clarity, purpose, discipline, and the unshakable role fathers play in developing strong and emotionally grounded young men. This conversation gets to the core of why this podcast exists. So let's get on to it. Eric, welcome to Raising Men.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let's dive right into it. The reason that this podcast exists is because I believe that there's a masculinity crisis. And you, I think, came from the same place when you started writing your book of the same name. And now you've got 3 daughters and 1 son, but you decided to focus on raising men as opposed to just raising kids. Why did you do that?
So that would have to come from what happened to myself and my father. So when I was about 15 or 16 years old, this story is in the book, Raising Men, as a matter of fact. But I had come downstairs in our house where we lived in Foster City. It's up in the Bay Area. And I rounded the corner and my parents were waiting there for me. And how the story goes is my dad goes, "Hey, I'm sick and I have to go to the hospital to get better." And what had happened was he was suffering from like some pretty severe mental illness. I think they called it at the time clinical depression. So there was some chemistry that was off. And then he went into a series of treatments, electric shock therapy at Stanford. And this was back, in the 80s. So it wasn't super kind.
Yeah, that wasn't coming. It was.
Yeah, not at all. So for all intents and purposes, I lost my father, and my father was everything to me. My father was the bishop of our church. He was the captain of our sheriff's department. All I ever was going to do was follow in his footsteps. And when he got sick, at that age, how I describe it is I was too young to be without a father, but I was just old enough to know that I still needed one.
Yeah.
And that sent me on a search. And then I had an older brother who ended up being an addict. I had a former father-in-law that was killed prematurely. And just as you go through life, there's a male and a female role when it comes to raising a kid. And I started to feel the impacts of having lost that masculine role in my life. Really, we're right at one of the most important times, 15, 16. That's when a father typically is going to drop the hammer with some of your behavior. Right. So that's how it all started.
Wow. That's fascinating. Now, would you agree with me that there's kind of a masculinity crisis going on?
Yeah, it is for this reason that I cannot go on social media without a very tight algorithm. Like I got to make sure it's very careful, notched down to fun things.
Really curate your feed.
With that?
Yeah, you really have to curate your feed. Otherwise, you'll be driven mad.
Oh, yeah. It'll freak you out. But yeah, there definitely is. There's a big problem with masculinity. And the problem is everybody's operating from an antiquated system. So it's what I would describe as traditional masculinity. And here's the problem. The biggest problem, it is a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. So we have all these young men, these boys on social media The messages that are getting fed to them are all over the place. And the masculine role models or the more masculine channels, they're still operating with the old school stuff. It's grow a beard, hop in a chill, what is it called? An ice bath. It's gun, gun, gun. It's like this physical presentation of man, which is a totally legitimate form of masculinity back in a time where our primary role was protect, hunt, fight, things like that. And not that we don't still need that type of masculinity, but now the world has changed. It's more competitive, it's more dynamic, and it requires a lot of creativity. It requires a lot of ability to sit down and design. So now we have young men who might find themselves in front of a computer or a video game, and there's some negative things that can happen from that. But there's some also very positive things that can happen from that. They understand how to focus. They know how to get into flow. They can continuously create hour after hour. So now these kind of kids, and probably probably a couple hundred other variations that don't fit that normal traditional masculinity, they're left with nothing to hold on to, right? If all they got is a bearded dude jacking a bunch of weights and jumping in a cold bathtub, they're like, well, wait, where do I go? Where's my masculine role model? And I think that's a big reason a lot of these poor guys are left really questioning themselves in a way that leaves them vulnerable to what's suggested on social media. So it's a failed model, not because it was broken, but because the environment has changed. And if you think about this was something I learned not too long ago. Somebody was describing women as the ones who get to choose who procreates. And it like blew my mind. Because I know women will talk about not being empowered and things like that. But for me, I've always had tremendous amount of respect for women. They've always been very powerful to me. But I lost my father, so my mother was everything to me.
Yeah.
So my point there is, if women are choosing who they, lack of a better term, breed with, well, now we're going to start getting different breeds of young men. They're going to be breeding with the creatives. They're going to be breeding with some of them who might be more sensitive. And they need something to hold on to. And that's what the second book is the framework for what I would consider modern masculinity, and everything I teach online, all of my courses, everything I do is geared towards that.
So how do you define a modern, healthy masculinity?
So I'll speak it here's how I would define it. The reason why I pause right there is I also believe this sentence would apply to femininity, like feminine side.
Sure.
Except for, you'll see why. So here's what I believe the role of a father is, the role of a man. I believe the role of a father is to learn how to use his passions to harmoniously fulfill and care for his personal, financial, and professional purposes. Yeah. So if you break that sentence down, and I'll do it real quick and we dig in if you want. When I say use passions, sometimes that's referred to, if you're in the spiritual world, they're going to say it's your gifts. Some people will call it the talents. But when I talk about passions, which we can unpack, but what I'm talking about is if you're inside of your passion, you are living your authentic self. So now this is important. So now no matter what the young man or even the young lady, whatever they got going on, if they're using passion as a guide, then they know they're operating inside of their authentic self. Now here's the other part. Because we're in a competitive environment, passion isn't something you get to do after you're already wealthy, after you've already made it. Because it's competitive, we need to be operating in passion because it's the only way we can produce the incomes, which are quite large nowadays, that we require to survive now in the 30 plus years old age when we can no longer work. So when I take passion into the fulfillment of purposes, the whole, everything is now covered: personal, financial, professional purposes. And I say harmoniously care for those things. And that's the other side of traditional masculinity. What the male job used to be was sacrifice everything, come home, drink a beer, ignore little Johnny, and that was it. And now we see a bunch of father figures not able to compete. So now they're living this lackluster life, and then their sons and their daughters, but then their sons can't look at them as the example. It's called tertiary competitors. Now we have people online who are polished. And they've already been through the algorithm, so the things they get to see is already passed the test of being interesting and engaging.
Yeah.
So now now they end up following kind of like a false prophet there. So that would be my definition of modern masculinity, using our passions to harmoniously care for all of our purposes. And you take that sentence, you can't go wrong.
I love that formulation. I absolutely love it. And it it marries up masculinity and femininity in a way that I haven't really seen that done before. Because that does apply regardless of gender, but it respects the differences in in the individuals, right? And I just absolutely love that formulation. It's very, very powerful. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it not only respects the specific kind of human that person is, it requires it. So it pulls them forward from all of the muck that they're getting surrounded. If you give a young man, then they start to lock onto a purpose. Purpose is powerful. Purpose is what allows you to say no to things. It clears everything up because you're like, no, that's my purpose. This is where I'm going. And then when we add the passion thing, it's like, okay, all of the muck will start to fall away. It takes a little bit of time. And for fathers, it takes, probably a good year of study. This is no small, it's not like going into a martial arts studio and getting your black belt. This is more like jujitsu. So it takes some work, but the important thing, I think, or the powerful thing for fathers, and they don't realize this, it's one of those things that it's like you put energy into your passion and your purpose. Well, you start increasing your deployable levels of time and energy because it makes you more competitive. And again, that's important because now they're available. Now they're living a good and healthy life to show their son. So yes, it does respect who the individual is, but also requires it too.
In your book, Raising Men, you talk about the lessons that SEALs pass on to their sons, or you talk about the lessons that you got from your SEAL training that you are attempting to pass on to your son. What are some of the top 2 or 3 lessons that every father can apply, whether or not they have a military background? I'm sure that not everybody needs to tie their son's hands and feet and throw them into the deep end of a pool.
No, not at all. But I'll start with that. So I've had some comments or feedback about some of the things they talk about in the book. My favorite story is my son was sharing. There's a story about him not doing his homework and his skateboard got smashed against a rock. He got his PlayStation in the pool during winter. And California is not super cold, but it was cold, and he had to go in and get it. One of his friends was like, I think that's abuse.
Yeah, I remember those stories. They're delightful stories.
Yeah, but here's why I just jumped the dog pile on that when you're talking about the time that the thing. Kids, there's a whole bunch of behavior science. I had a Belgian Malinois. I trained her to be a protection dog. It was from Mike Ritland's pipeline, and I learned so much there. So I think one of the most important things a parent can do is understand behavior science, and I do talk, it's like tongue in cheek when I say raise your kid like a dog. But if you ever been around dog trainers, they're crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
they have spreadsheets that that will assess the level of joy that their treat, or right, that their reward. I'm like, good Lord, you guys are nutty, but I appreciate it, because now I can learn from you. So, tying their feet, things like that. What's important to understand is that that was all within their limits, right? I was their coach, I was their trainer, I was their father. I know how far I can go before they get scared. I know, or scared. Being scared is okay, and because you can build courage with some fear. But I know if I go too far, that fear will stick, right? We'll lose the opportunity to produce courage, and will produce trauma. So from a context of behavior science and really understanding your kid, and the way you really understand them, for me, is to be outdoors and doing a lot of kind of adventure athlete stuff. Nothing as extreme as people think. It's just like, for instance, I was just with my grandkids and I threw a climbing rope over a tree, put him in, I had to tie the harness. I think they call it a ranger seat, and I chucked him. He's swinging from the tree, but, people are like, oh, dangling your grandkid or your son from a tree and tossing him, that's extreme. But you know what? Really, it's not. It's more safe than a swing. It's just cooler. You know what I mean? It's much cooler.
Yeah.
And you get to see how they react.
I love that. Yeah. It seems to me that much of SEAL training and a lot of what you talk about in Raising Men is it revolves around developing resilience. And so, first of all, would you agree with that? And second of all, how do you develop resilience in training, and how does that translate into your parenting style?
So when we're talking about resilience, we also have to talk about perseverance at the same time. And here's what I mean.
Yeah.
So when we're persevering, that's basically a sustained effort, right? Despite difficulty or failure. Persevering by its nature means we're going to get tired and a little bit beat up. So we got to start there, because then when we go to resilience, well, what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to either maintain and or restore your capacity to take action. So perseverance could be us getting after something and right, and we get worn out and tired, and then resilience is to be able to recover from that and come back the next day as strong or stronger.
Yeah.
So if you just take that definition and break it down, and I would encourage this for all parents as well, like all of these words we kind of throw around and use, look it up, chat GPT it, however you do, start to really understand these words and pull them apart. So how do we form resilience? Well, we have to understand that we're trying to maintain our capacity or recover. So like in SEAL training, you start to learn things like they run you in soft sand a lot. I don't know if you've ever ran in soft sand.
I have. I used to play beach volleyball, so did a lot of running in soft sand. It's about 3 times as difficult as running normally.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then if you become aware that you're running in soft sand rather than the hard pack, then it gets 5 times. And you're like, wait, we could just run right
The more you
here,
pay attention to it, the harder it gets.
right? Yeah. So maintaining. So there's little things. There's something called if you're not cheating, you're not trying,
Mm.
and there's all kinds of context for that in SEAL training. But
Yeah.
like these are things like when I would run in soft sand, I would look for maybe a tire track, or I would look for where somebody else's foot ahead of me already struck, right? Because I'm resilient. But part of resilience is maintaining my ability to act. Going out on the boats, they put us in these IBSs, inflatable boats, small. That's how the Navy names some things sometimes. Out in waves, right? And guys got paddles, and they didn't necessarily grow up in surfing. So resilience might mean maintaining, not getting a paddle wrapped around your head by bailing before guys start flailing with their paddles. Whatever it is, there's obstacle courses where the logs roll, right? Again, resilience is not getting hurt, not falling off of things. So maintenance is a big piece of resilience. And resilience is a skill. It's not some trait. It's not something we're born with.
Yeah.
Now, here's the most interesting thing about resilience, I think, when you're talking about SEAL training. I was a corpsman in the Navy, which means I was their medic. I was a corpsman in Marine Reconnaissance. That is their special operations. Now I believe that's all connected to special forces as well. So I had a lot of experience, and the instructors knew that. So I was seeing and treating guys in my BUDS class, which is basic SEAL training, and fully treating. Like I said, ton of experience. And one of the most interesting things I noticed was a secret, kind of crafty. How about this? Maybe the word would be clandestine. Oh no,
Okay.
covert way they would quit. And how they would quit is they would not recover, meaning they wouldn't take the Motrin, they wouldn't do the physical therapy, they wouldn't do the contrast baths, the ice rubs, like you name it. They wouldn't do it. And at the time, it blew me away. And then it was not really until I got into the world of business and entrepreneurship that I started to see other people do it in different ways. And what that means is they're going to run themselves into the ground,
Yeah.
so that they don't have to continue. Because in SEAL training, they're very careful not to run you into the ground, because once you run a human body into the ground, they can't keep going. So they want to keep you going. So resilience has a whole lot it's a skill set, and you're maintaining your capacity and you're making sure that you recover.
You've got this great scene in the book where you talk about the mental aspect of resilience there, and you describe a situation where and this is my recollection. It's been a little while since I read this passage, but um, it was early in the morning and it was cold, and you were looking out at the sea, and you knew that you were about to have to go for a long swim, and because you had been a surfer, and because you were jazzed up about it, you were looking forward to it almost. I mean, it was going to be unpleasant physically, but your mental state was one of excitement. And your compadre next to you ended up getting so much anxiety looking at that and feeling like anticipating the horribleness of it that he ended up tapping out right then and there. He couldn't take it and he decided to quit before they even got in the water. And that's an example of what you're talking about for me. And it's a beautiful scene in that book, I thought.
Yeah, it's my I'm probably most known for that kind of thinking. And again, if we're talking about resilience, there's 80 guys on the beach who are having to deal with the mental trauma of getting back in the cold water. There was two of us, myself and a gentleman named Chris Campbell. He had passed away in Teen Six, amazing guy. There's two of us that would kind of joke, make fun of the other guys. And that's a great example of maintaining our capacity. That's part of resilience. During third phase, when we were out in the island, the entire time, we're out there for a month. The entire time, we'd get up early, and that's, geez, you go through Hell Week, everything like that. You think it's the pinnacle, then you realize, like, nope, Hell Week was just to get you used to what's about to happen to you for the next 4 months, right? And then
Wow.
the island is a 30-day culmination of that kind of thing. So it's rough, but every morning I was like, hey guys, I think the instructors were drinking last night. I think we're good. We're not even going to PT this morning, so don't even sweat it. And there's the guys that would get on board with me. And again, we're being resilient because we're not dealing with any of that trauma that's about to ensue, that's about to occur. I don't know what to say. And is it a Mark Twain thing? But like half the worries or most of our worries are things that are never going to happen. So just it protects your brain, and it's part of that maintaining your capacity.
Yeah. I heard a quote one time, and I love the way that they put it, and I wish I knew what the source was. What is, don't borrow suffering from the future.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
I noticed in the book, you use a lot of outdoor challenges and extreme environments. We joked about tying your kids up and throwing them in the water, and you use those as metaphors for life. How can ordinary parents integrate those lessons into their daily life?
So first, we have to have intention. Another way we can describe intention is a purpose for what we're doing.
I've heard you refer to that as a clear end state.
Yeah. Yes. My good friend Larry Yatch would describe that as a clear end state. Like, what is it we're trying to produce? So like with kids, for instance, we might be thinking about things like confidence, courage, respect. Like those are three things. So first thing with parents is, like I said before, words are powerful. Look them up. Hold your own distinction so you can describe it to your kid over and over and over again for 20 plus years before they're like, oh, geez, Dad, that was then they tell you what it is. I'm like, dude, I told you that 10 years ago. But
Right.
first you have to have intention. And the attention needs to also include yourself. So, people with parenting be like, it's not about you, it's about the kids. I'm like, it's about all of us. Right. So for me, I'm an outdoor guy. I like outdoor adventure. I like those kind of activities. So I'm going to use those as tools to produce courage, respect, responsibility, whatever it is. Now, I will say this about it. Being the only dad doing some things like that also helps, because if we look at the marketplace, I'm doing business, right? Value, importance, utility, and worth. But one of the key components of value besides that is scarcity. So I inherently like the outdoors and doing these adventurous things, but there's all kinds of things that could be adventurous and aspirational and inspiring to your kids. So have an intention, and one of those intentions is to show up, to produce identity with your kids as the father. Because when we have identity, people listen and people follow us.
Yeah, I love that. You kind of have two clear end states there, right? You have your own, you have your own clear state of what your parenting mission is and what your unique value proposition, if you want to use business speak to it, is, and all that. But then you're teaching your boys how to define clear end states for themselves also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately, what's your job? What's your job as a parent? Your job is to make sure that your boy has the skills and capability and mental resilience to thrive. And that's it. And so what else is there other than, okay, well, have a clear end state and then fight like hell to make it happen.
Yep. And then you center everything on that. Like we talked about at the beginning when I was talking about traditional masculinity versus modern, that's the end state. Learn how to use your passions to fulfill, harmoniously care for all of your purposes. Same thing. Now, that conversation, right, that drives everything else. Well,
Yeah.
okay, we do need perseverance. We do need um, resilience. We do need courage. We need respect. We need responsibility. Like all of these things start to be all, not only do they all start to show up because they're required, but they all start to take on meaning also. And that's another thing. Now, if you think about a human, when I say use your passion, that means be your authentic self. When I say harmoniously fulfill your purposes, that means living a good life, right? Because when you don't care for your personal, financial, professional purposes, you've got breakdowns. Now, the reason I bring that up again is one, I'll repeat that left and right because it is what I want to stay focused on for everything I do. But the other reasons it's important too is think about a human. That's going to trigger their survival mechanism. Might not be the first time, but if it's like, well, that guy's out there using his passion to care for all of his purposes, that's how you survive. Because we're autopoietic, means we self-select survival. And it's another part of pulling them in. It's another part of attracting your children and other people into your leadership, to your authority, to whatever it is you're doing. And I don't mean authority like I'm going to control anyone. I mean authority like, hey, this is what's allowed, this is what's forbidden, if you want to use your passion to fulfill your purpose.
How do you think about rites of passage? What role do rites of passage play in turning boys into men? And how can it feels like that's one of the institutions that is crumbling. How do we recreate those in today's culture?
Yeah. Um, how I started to address that was something called seal pups. Uh, and I wish I had done more of it even. And I wish I was still doing it. Although now the grandkids, I took another lap. But rites of passage, well, let's talk about a tribe. So my definition of a brotherhood, if I'm talking to men, or a tribe, if I'm just keeping it general, is a group of two or more people that protect, automate, and accelerate the current and future situation of each member. Now that's a lot of words, but when I say situation, I mean using your passion to fulfill your purposes. That's a tribe. These are people that protect, accelerate, and make it possible.
Yeah.
So now rites of passage, like we're typically looking at warriors. And I've seen some attempts, I think, of filling in the blanks there, or doing it outside of a combat unit or any unit that is facing life or death circumstances. And from what little I've seen of it, they miss the mark because an important part to a rite of passage, I believe, is that it's a high stakes game. That is a matter of life or death. And what you're doing is very serious, very serious. And I don't think that many fathers or men take themselves that seriously in their own life. And I don't think they take themselves that seriously in the lives of others either. So when we're talking rites of passage, we're talking bringing up our young men. And there's a female version of that too, but bringing up our young men to be, how would I say it? Like a Jordan Peterson would describe it, being dangerous, being powerful in their minds, right? To be capable, to be able to care for people, to care for others, to be very important. And I think it's incredibly important for a young man to transition through that so that they do take themselves extremely seriously in their lives and the lives of others.
Yeah, I like that formulation, and I mean one of the things that I'm loving so much about this conversation is how precise you are. And you spoke in the very beginning about the importance of language and the importance of understanding the definitions of things, and then you're so clear and so precise about, well, what do I mean by tribe? What do I mean by brotherhood? What do I mean by masculinity? And you're very clear, and you're very precise about it, and it's a definition that okay, now we can work. Now we know what the thing is. We're not just waving our hands at it, but we're moving forward. And I love that. It is such a powerful. It's such a powerful reflex, and I think it's worth putting a pin in that and saying that that is a really important thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that would be also an example of how seriously I take it. Now, it's not like I'm running around like, "Bah, bah, bah, bah," like, getting after my kids, like, I'm a very laid I mean, I grew up a surfer, skater, I'm very laid back, but it's like, make no mistake, if you watch me do something, I'm doing something for a very specific purpose, with intention, even if I'm just taking a nap. It's you know what I mean? There's a purpose going on there because it's tied to my purposes, and that stuff is life or death. If you don't get those things handled, it really is. You suffer, cause other people to suffer and die early.
Yeah.
It is a big deal. And it's a big not only a big deal for the individual, think about our country. So if you look at our country, like, okay, well, what if that's what families were up to? What if a family had a mother and a father that was using their passion to fulfill their purposes, and then they were able to articulate all of the language and all of the frameworks that they use to do it to their children so that they can raise their children? So you know what I'm talking about? Like that is a very powerful country. That is to me, like that supersedes warfare and everything like that as far as I'm concerned, because that is the core of human existence, and that's what makes this country strong.
Yeah, it feels like that is what has made the country strong. The way and it feels like maybe that's a skill that is slipping through our fingers now, and we need to get it back.
It absolutely is because guys are getting hammered in the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's more competitive, it's more dynamic. They're using old school strategies that were built during the fourth industrial revolution, where the whole idea was to work hard, work hard, work hard, right? In the factory, 12 hours, hustle, hustle, hustle. And that culture is not going to cut it anymore. And it is why we have to have a strategy that is designed for the current environment we are in. Because mothers and fathers don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they're cooked just trying to pay the bills. Don't Not even to mention the 30 plus years of old age when they're not going to be able to work.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important.
It's a really challenging thing to identify and maintain your purpose in everything you do. I've been thinking about that and trying to figure out to what extent that I apply that in my own life and or have not. And I'm realizing that I'm feeling resistance to it. And the resistance is it makes me feel like I don't ever get to have any fun then, right? I always have to be working towards something. But that's not the way it works. I having fun can be done with purpose as well, right?
Yeah. So it's always interesting. And I probably have to figure out a way to say it better at the beginning, because I'm always surprised when somebody doesn't ask me, how do I figure out my purposes? Like, it's an interesting phenomenon, but the word purpose and passion, I mean, you'd mentioned my language and precision before. Don't think those words, I haven't figured those ones out. So let's talk about that real quick. What is purpose? Purpose is to know the 50 plus parts of your professional, financial, and personal life that you were created to care for.
Hmm.
That's what a purpose is. And to understand what the positive impacts of that thing being cared for look like and what the negative impacts of that thing not being cared for look like. That way we know if we're on par. Right. And then we need to design or find the strategy to fulfill those purposes. Now, here's what people don't understand. If I were to tell you, like, okay, Eric, what are the 50 things? There's about 20 plus professional, there's about 6 or so financial, kind of depending on how you put it, and there's about a dozen personal.
Hmm.
And what happens is our professional side takes up what we do is we start like men. We start with our professional side, our career first. And then what happens is we try to stuff our personal side into whatever time, energy, creativity, and currency that thing left over, and it falls short.
Yeah.
So when I talk about purpose, I get it, right? Remember what I said, even when I'm taking a nap?
Yeah.
Right? All that is me putting habits in place that make sure I'm performing at my highest. But inside of our personal purpose, that's things like spirituality, that's
Mm.
friendship, yes, finances, brotherhood or sisterhood, fun and adventure, career, right? How we work, membership, helping others. Like these are all good things. So how do I say this? Like how you establish your purpose is I teach people using a mind map, and they map those things out. And what they're doing is what I call a linguistic filter. What they're doing is becoming aware. Like, oh, I have a purpose where I'm supposed to have fun and adventure. because it makes me more creative. It puts me into flow. It relaxes me. It allows me to be resilient, right? Like these things are important. So, okay, well, I can't just white knuckle my way into adventure and fun, right? So when we define those things, it's just like this. I would be overseas, and somebody get upset with me, like, why are you always worried about somebody potentially attacking us? I'm like, I'm not worried about it. I was just trained ad nauseum to identify these things. So I'm just going around, these things are showing up for me, no different than a photographer walking through a forest and noticing the lighting and the mist, you know what I mean? All the things that they
Yeah.
would notice.
Yeah.
So all purpose is identifying these things and basically memorizing them. And there's only a dozen. And it and then what happens, all of our time and energy starts to align with those things. And when you have those things cared for, we build power. So it's not this what people get it, maybe because I'm intense or so precise, but I'm precise because if I align people's actions, right, and efforts with that, their life's going to get real, real good.
Yeah, and I think it's not even like you have to you're creating this. They already exist. You're just identifying them. Your purpose is already there. You're out there living it. But what you're not doing is living it purposefully. And you're not having conscious awareness of that's what your purpose is. And so you're kind of fuzzy about it. You're to use another term that you bring up in your role, you're chasing the ball. Right?
Mhm. Exactly.
You don't know where the ball is. And so you're just kind of like shooting around it. But by going through this exercise and by identifying those things, then you can have conscious awareness of them and you can realize, yeah, that's why I'm taking a nap right now, or that's why I'm deciding to play video games, or that's why I'm deciding to buckle down and work till 2 a.m. today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now everything has meaning. We're no longer distracted, right? Like all of your time and energy is 100% invested all day, every day, right? It's always doing something. Might be sitting on a dresser, your money or whatever it is, but like, well, might as well point it at the things that if we get right, make our life really good. And if we prevent them from breaking down, how's our life not hurt, right? That's all I'm talking about here. And it's just not that hard of a drill. But it's not doing nothing, right? Like how many people how many people out there want to be able to harmoniously care for all parts of their life so that they can live a good and dignified life? So how many people want either passions to do it? Everybody,
Everybody.
right?
Yeah.
Anyone in their right mind, like, okay, do it. And then people, like you said, you're like, oh, I'm like resistant to it. That sounds like hard. Like I'm locked in all the time. No, you're not. I work like 4 hours a day. I run, work out like 2 hours a day. I go to the wind tunnel. I surf. I climb. Like it's not. But why? Because I paid attention to my purposes and I just put my energy into caring for them. And then I realized like, oh, if I'm working much more than 4 or 5 hours a day on my professional side, I'm not going to be able to care for my personal side. And with that realization, guess what? I designed my business to care for my personal side. So it's just a shift in mindset, really.
Yeah. That is such and you end up wasting so much less time because
Oh,
you're always rowing in the direction of the end goal.
yeah, and here's the thing too. Those purposes, they are either going to create or destroy your ability to live a good life. They don't just sit still either. They're out there operating anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm really suggesting since they're already out there in play, why don't we just identify them, get the language in our brain so we can notice them and then move in a way that aligns them and have them work together very well. It's
Yeah.
it's not it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's less effort than a semester of college. It's not that much, you know what I mean? But it's not a little. It's we are talking about mastering life.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so
Yeah.
I get very you could answer my students. I'm like, why didn't you finish this assignment? You don't know what you're missing. It's like,
Right. It's everything. What are you afraid of? Yeah. Now, I like
yeah,
to finish up these conversations by putting people on the spot with the same question. Give me one good operating principle that you think every parent listening should know about raising sons with excellence.
Tell me when you say operating principle, tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, just like what is, what is um, a good rule of thumb to live by, or just something to keep in mind as you're trying to define or decide what kind of parent you want to be, or what kind of or what kind of interaction you want to have with your boy.
Gotcha. So if we're gonna have one, it'll sound cliche if you don't know what to do with it, but if we're gonna have one, it's leading from the front. Here's what I mean by that, because I don't want it to become a cliche. My grandfather was in the FBI. My father was a sheriff. He was a bishop, a spiritual man, all these things. They both weren't, they both checked out early, right? My life still continued based off of what I observed as a very young child, right? They led from the front. So if we're going to do anything, we need to be somebody that they would aspire to be as well, or at least not exact, right? But that's why we have the whole passion thing. No. My purposes are going to be a little different. My passions, purpose is what we're to get done. Passions are how we do it. They can have that variation, but it's like live a good life. Live a good life. That's the operating principle. Because if you're living a good life, they'll be able to follow that eventually. I mean, it doesn't happen right away sometimes. They have to go get hammered made in the marketplace first. Yeah, but that's it. Lead from the front. I mean that. I don't mean be the first one across the finish line, anything like that. I mean, live a good, intentional life so that they can see that.
I think that is a really, really powerful sentiment. Eric, thank you so much for spending the time with me and sharing your wisdom. And thank you all for listening. You can find more of Eric Davis's work, including his books, including Raising Men, and his training programs and community at ericdavis215.com and on Instagram at Eric_Davis215. Eric, thanks again. And thanks for being part of Raising Men.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
And all of you, remember, you are a great parent. Raising Men is produced by Fulfil Hernandez. This episode was edited by Ralph Tolentino.